Hi, it's Rhiannon from the Epsom Bakehouse, and this week I'll be encouraging you not to make this Bake Off Bread Week mistake. If you're enjoying all these bread making hints and tips and you'd like to know more, you can sign up for my regular emails with bread making tips. Just to start you off, you get 5 top bread making tips from me straight to your inbox. You can do so via the link below this video. The Great British Bake Off is back, fantastic, and I know lots of you like watching along. And this week, it's Bread Week, my favourite week of the show. I always love to see the kind of creations that the contestants make. I think they do a fantastic job. And I think we all probably remember from a bygone series when Paul made that fantastic lion. That was Paul, a contestant, by the way, not the judge. Made a fantastic lion out of bread. But there's one thing on Bake Off Bread Week that I always think, don't do that. It wouldn't be what I'd say to my students. And that is the time they have to make their bread. Of course, it's a competition, and so there has to be something that sets them apart, not just making all of that dough and creating breads that are up to the eagle eye of Paul Hollywood. But the time available is often really short in terms of baking bread, about 4 hours usually or less. And that is the mistake that I would encourage you not to make. When you're baking bread, try not to rush things. Good bread takes time. It's something that I'm always saying to students in my online classes. Once they finish a class, I encourage them to leave their dough to rise for a couple of hours, and I often get slightly shocked looks like, isn't this going to be ready very soon? There are some really great reasons for leaving your dough to rise for as long as possible, obviously without letting it overprove. So what's happening when your bread is rising, and why give it some more time? So when you've mixed together your dough, the yeast get to work on the flour inside that dough and break down the starch. They produce compounds that add lots of flavour to your dough. They'll feed on some of those sugars as well. But if you give it time, the yeast will break down the starch and create lots of flavour in your dough. So that's the first great reason not to make that mistake of rushing your bread dough. If you want to get lots of flavour into your bread, give it time. Now you might be thinking, well, it's quite warm in my kitchen, and you've said before, Rhiannon, the yeast work best at a warm temperature, so surely they're going to be chomping through that starch really quickly. Well, if you want to extend the amount of time that you leave your bread dough, then you can do a couple of things. You can either add a little less yeast and your bread dough will just take a little longer to rise, or you can lower the temperature. So you can actually perhaps either put your bread dough somewhere cooler or rise it overnight in your kitchen, or even use the fridge and put your bread dough well covered into the fridge to rise. Your dough will still rise in the fridge, the yeast will still work at those cool temperatures, it will just take a lot longer. So for example, an overnight rise. As well as adding in lots of flavour, when you leave your dough to rise for a long time, you also allow the gluten structure to develop in your dough. The gluten is a stretchy protein that only forms when flour absorbs the water in your dough or other liquid that you've added in. It forms together from 2 other proteins bonding together, and as I said, it forms a stretchy protein. It's like an elastic band. It stretches out, and when you let go, it will shrink back to almost the original size it was. Gluten forms the kind of scaffold of your bread, and it's really important to give your dough structure. If you want to make sure that your dough rises well, you do need to give it time to develop that gluten and develop the structure in your bread. One last thing about leaving your dough to rise for a long time is that it can actually make your bread slightly more digestible. So the yeast have actually done quite a lot of work for you, breaking down the starches in the bread. So those are just a few reasons why it's good not to make that mistake of rushing your bread dough rising. Give it plenty of time and you'll reap the benefits. More flavour, great structure, and a beautiful loaf turned out. Why not try it today? Just leave your dough to rise for a little bit longer. Especially if you're in the UK or Northern Hemisphere, it's gone a little bit cooler, and it means that your bread dough will just take longer anyway if you're leaving it out on the side to rise. Let me know if you've given it a go. It's been helpful. As I said at the top, if you want any more of these bread making tips, or you'd like to receive further emails from me with recipes and other bread making tips, then you can sign up via the link below this video. And if you'd like to know more about joining one of my online classes where you can learn step by step to bake breads such as baguettes, brioche, ciabatta, cinnamon buns, then go to www.theepsombakehouse.co.uk and find out more about all of my online lessons. As for now, I say have lots of fun baking, and we'll speak again soon. Bye!